Assalamu alaikum guys, welcome to chapter 7 lesson 2. So today you're going to be multiplying and you're going to start factoring polynomials. So your instructions today are to simplify. Make sure that when you simplify you write it standard form. So you're using distributive property to multiply. You've got a 5x sitting outside the parentheses, and you know that when you see parentheses it means multiplication. Inside the parentheses we have negative 2x plus 3. So what that means is that you're going to go ahead and take that 5x, you're going to multiply it to negative 2x, and you're also going to multiply it to the 3. Now remember, you've got to use the rules that you learned in chapter 5. When you're multiplying the same base, make sure you're adding exponents and so on and so forth. So for the first problem, we're going to take 5x and multiply it to negative 2x. And we say positive times negative is going to be negative. So there you go, negative, and then 5 times 2 is 10. And then remember that x times x, the power on the exponents is 1, so 1 plus 1 is 2, so x times x is x squared. And then you've got a plus 3, so you've got 5x times a positive 3. 5 times 3 is 15, and then just drop the x. And this is your answer. And I know that some of the comments have been that this chapter has been easy so far. Yes, it does start easy, but towards the end of the chapter it gets a little bit tough. So let's try another example. And I'm sorry for the reflection that keeps on coming, but if I move my board a little bit too much, you see that it reflects on the board. And if I move it out, it reflects on the glass. But this is the best I can do, guys. Next problem, let's say that we have negative 3h, and then parentheses open, negative 2 minus 4h. Okay, again, distributive property. Go ahead and multiply that negative 3 to the negative 2h and to the negative 4h. So again, negative 3 times a negative 2 is a positive 6. We're not going to write plus 6. We're just going to write 6. And don't forget that it does have an h. This one doesn't have an h, so the h drops down. Then negative 3h times negative 4h. Negative times negative is positive. And then 3 times 4 is 12. H times h is h squared. Remember, we're adding the exponents. And remember, it did say to write in standard form. This is not standard form. Remember that standard form is always the greatest power first, followed in descending order. So the proper way to write this, 12h squared plus 6h. Okay? Now the next problem, let's say that we have negative m, parentheses open, negative 2m plus 7. So your workout basically is showing me that you're doing distributive property. A lot of times kids forget to do the distributive property, and sometimes they forget to multiply one of the terms that's inside the parentheses. So again, negative times negative is positive. It's an invisible 1, so 1 times 2 is 2. And then m times m is m squared. Then I have a negative times a positive, that's negative. And then the negative 1 times that 7 is the negative 7. And don't forget, this one doesn't have an m, so just drop the m in. So pretty easy, right? Now, it does get a little bit, the expressions do get a little bit longer than this. So before we go on with the same instructions, we're still going to be simplifying, and we're going to be now multiplying 3 terms. We're going to make sure that it's written in standard form more than anything. That's the important part here. So let's say, for example, I have 4x squared, and then I have parentheses open, and I have 3x minus 2x squared, and then plus 5. All right? Remember, distributive property, this is your way of showing your workout, that you're remembering that you're multiplying to every single term. And then 4 times 3 is 12. And then x squared times x. Remember, the power, one of the powers is 2. The other power is 1, so that would be x cubed, and let me write this a little bigger than that. Then on this one, you've got a positive 4x squared times a negative 2x squared. So it's a negative, and then 4 times 2 is 8. X squared times x squared, x to the 4th. Remember, we're adding exponents. Then I've got a positive 4x times a positive 5. 4 times 5 is 20, and only this one has an x squared, so drop the x squared in. Now, is this in standard form? No, it's not. X to the 4th is in the middle, x to the 3rd is first, x squared is at the end. So go ahead and rewrite in standard form. Remember, you've got to take the symbol that's in front of it. It's a negative 8x to the 4th. So negative 8x to the 4th. This is a positive 12x to the 3rd. So just write plus 12x to the 3rd and then drop the 20x squared. And then that's your answer. So for this part of the lesson, it's pretty simple. You've just got to remember to go ahead and, if you're multiplying the same base, add the exponents, okay? Now the next part of the lesson, I've got to erase this, guys. We're going to be finding a GCF. GCF is greatest common factor. And the greatest common factor is what's going to help us start factoring. Find the GCF, and this part is very easy. You just got to remember your, what do you call it, your factors of certain numbers. So let's say you've got 12x plus 48. Now the way you find a GCF, because your answer basically is going to be just what's the GCF equal to, okay? First thing you're going to ask yourself, both of these numbers are divisible by what? And you've got to get the greatest factor. So when you think about it, 12 is divisible by 12, 48 is divisible by 12 as well. So I can divide this term by 12, and I can also divide that term by 12. Then we look at the x's. Only this term has an x, but this term doesn't have an x. So if 12 is the greatest factor, that's it, guys. That's the greatest value that I can divide both terms by. So my GCF here is just 12, and that's my answer. Okay, let's try another one. What about if I have 4x squared plus 10x? Okay, first thing you ask yourself, always evaluate the coefficients first. Both 4 and 10 are both divisible by 2. So 2 is a factor of both, all right? Then look at our x's. This one has an x squared, this one has an x. So the maximum x's that I can take is the least power, because I can divide this by x, and I can also divide that by x. So both of these terms are divisible by 2x. So my GCF is 2x. Okay? What about if I have negative 25 y cubed plus 75 y squared? So again, look at the values, the coefficients. Now, one of the things that I have to tell you, if your expression begins with a negative, you have to factor out a negative first, okay? So both of these are going to be factoring a negative value out first. Now, both of these numbers are divisible by 25. So that's 25, 25. Now look at our values of y. We have y to the 3rd, y squared. So the maximum y's that we can pull out is a y squared. Because this is divisible by y squared, then this is also divisible by y squared. So then my GCF is negative 25 y squared. So GCF is negative 25 y squared. Okay? Now let's take it to where maybe you're factoring, and still with the same instructions, a trinomial. So far you've only been doing binomials. If you do a trinomial, it works in the same way. You just got to keep track of what the values are and think of the greatest value as well. So let's say that I have 13g cubed plus 39 g squared plus 26g. Okay? So all of these values, and you've got to think about it, all of these values are all divisible by the greatest common factor. Of course, we're not going to be factoring out a 1. Okay? So all of the numbers are divisible by 13. And sometimes you have to use your calculator. If you don't know that the greatest common factor here is 13, what you might want to see is the least value. Divide 39 by 13 and see if it gives you an integer. Divide 26 by 13, use your calculator, guys, to your advantage. Then the greatest g's, and by the way, these are g's, guys, not y's. The greatest g's is the least power, which is just g to the first, right? So my GCF here is 13g. Okay? So it's that simple. Now, we're going to start using part of this, the GCF, and actually factor out and rewrite an expression in our next part of the lesson. So your instructions here are factor each polynomial. Factor each polynomial. That means that you're going to pull out the GCF and then rewrite the expression accordingly. So let's say that we have 36x squared plus 12x. So the first thing I'm going to decide, what is my GCF? Both of these expressions are divisible by 12. For the coefficients, that's the greatest common factor. And then the maximum x's I can pull out is just x to the first. All right? So x and x. Now, what if I pulled out my GCF, if I'm saying that my GCF is 12x, then when I rewrite that GCF, I'm going to write it on the outside, okay? Then go ahead. What is 36 divided by 12? It's 3. And then remember your properties of dividing the same base. You keep the base and subtract exponents. So you've got x to the first, and you're not going to write x to the first, you're just going to write x. All right? And then the next step right here, what is 12x divided by 12x? It's 1. So this is your duly written expression. Now, one way that you can test, am I doing this right or not? You can use distributive property like the first part of the lesson, where you distribute that 12x and multiply to everything and see if it gives you the first value. 12x times 3x is 36x squared. And then 12x times 1 is the 12x. So then we know that we're doing it right. Okay? Next expression. Let's say that we have 121 and we've got y to the third plus 33y squared. Now this one you might have to think a little bit harder. And number one, I know that 121 is divisible by 11, and we're not looking for the GCF of 1. Every single number has a factor of 1. But I know that 121, I can come up with it 11 times 11. I also know that 33 is divisible by 11. So my GCF, as far as coefficients are concerned, is 11. Then go back, and by the way, this is a y, guys. Go back, how many y's can I pull out? Maximum is the least exponent, right? So this is divisible by y squared. This is also divisible by y squared. So my GCF gets pulled out, 11y squared, and then rewrite. What's 121 divided by 11? It's 11. Then y cubed divided by y squared is just 1. Because remember, we're subtracting exponents. 3 minus 2 is 1, but we're not going to write that 1. It's just y. It's understood that it's to the first. Then remember right here, y squared divided by y squared, they cancel out because it equals 1. And then 33 divided by 11 is 3. And that is our answer. Remember, test it. Go back and do distributive property. 11y squared times 11y is 121y to the cube. And then 11y squared times 3 is 33y squared. Okay? Now, let's go ahead and try it with a trinomial as well. And I think tomorrow, guys, I'm going to switch the board to the other side because the light is bothering me, honestly. So here we go. Next one, negative 36, and we've got y cubed, and then we've got plus 63, and we've got y squared, and then minus 81 y, okay? So let's think of the numbers that all of these are divisible by. Remember, we've got the leading coefficient on the expression, and it is negative 36. So we've got to factor out a negative, okay? So all of these terms are divisible by negative. Now, what's the value that all of them have the common factor of what? The common factor would be 9, okay? I know 81 is divisible by 9 because 9 times 9 is 81. I know 63 is divisible by 9 because 9 times 7 is 63. And then I know 36 is divisible by 9 because 9 times 4 is 36 as well. So we're going to pull out a negative 9. And then what's the maximum y's that we can pull out? The least exponent. So y. My GCF is 9y. And now I rewrite. Negative divided by negative is positive. 36 divided by 9 is 4. And then y cubed divided by y is y squared. Positive divided by negative is negative. And then 63 divided by 9 is 7. And then y squared divided by y leaves you with only one y. And then negative divided by negative is positive. And then 81 divided by 9 is 9. And remember that in that last term, the y's cancel out because y divided by y is 1. So our final answer here is that right there, okay? So it seems a little bit easy, but just keep track of the GCF. A lot of times kids will not factor out the greatest common factor. Sometimes there's still one more factor that they can make sure that if you pull out a GCF that you check the numbers again and make sure, are they divisible by another number? That if they're divisible by another value, okay, that means you didn't pull the GCF out. So let me just show you the last type of example that you can get on here, and we're almost done. You are still simplifying in this case, and you're writing it in standard form. Make sure that you always write in standard form. So let's say, for example, you have 2w, and then you've got, and actually I'm gonna have to squeeze this in a little bit, okay? So you've got 2w, and then w minus 3. Remember, it's got a parenthesis, so that means multiplication. And then plus w, and then another parenthesis, 3w squared plus 6. So in this case, you've got two sets of multiplication. You've got the first one, and then you've got the second set over here that is separated by that plus sign. So go ahead and multiply. 2w times w is 2w squared, and then 2w times a negative 3, negative 6w, and then a positive w times a 3w squared becomes plus 3w to the third, and then w times a positive 6 plus 6w, okay? Now, in this case, go ahead and see if there are any terms that you can combine together. Well, I have a w to the third and a w squared. Those cannot be combined with anything. But look at these terms right here. A plus 6w and a minus 6w, or negative 6w plus 6w. They basically cancel each other out. Now what's left? 2w squared plus 3w cubed. So write it in standard form. The 3w cubed comes first, followed by the 2w squared. Okay, and that's standard form. One more example, and then we're done. Let's say we have negative x squared, and then parentheses open, 2x minus 4, and then minus x, parentheses open, negative 3x squared plus 6. Again, you've got distributive property on two parts of it. And basically that is you showing me your workout. So I've got negative x squared times a positive 2x. So this becomes negative 2x cubed. Okay, negative times positive is negative. 2 times the 1 is 2. And then x squared times x is x cubed. Then I've got negative x squared times a negative 4. Negative times negative, positive. And then 4 times x squared, 4x squared. All right. Then I've got negative x times a negative 3x, negative times negative, positive, 3x squared times x, 3x cubed. All right. And then I've got negative x times a positive 6. Negative times positive is negative. 6 times x, 6x. Okay? Now, go ahead and ask yourself, are there any of the values in here that you can add together that have common terms? And in this case, we've got cubes. All right. Now, you've got a negative, and by the way, the cube is the greatest power, right? So you've got a negative 2x plus a 3x. That leaves you with a positive 1. But we're not going to write a 1. We just write x cubed. And then 4x squared and minus 6x cannot be combined. They have different exponents. So we just drop them down from from the greatest degree to the least degree. So my final answer right here is x cubed plus 4x squared minus 6x. So hopefully you found the lesson to be easy. I think the word problems will come later. I don't want to introduce them yet because they end up showing up right now and they end up showing up later. I want to move you along with the material because we got still quite a bit of material to cover for the rest of the chapter. So if you have any questions, guys, make sure that you attend class, and I'm willing to help you with any questions you have. We'll see you, inshallah.